Well, good afternoon. Thank you, everybody, coming here on a nice, warm day. I'm joined here by DOA Director Jonathan Warmer, along with OMB Director Brian Daniels. And we want to take the opportunity to update Rhode Islanders on the status of the Cranston Street Armory project. Today, we are releasing the independent financial review of the proposal to develop the Armory. Our administration requested this outside review as part of our due diligence process to determine if the proposal is financially feasible and in the best interest of the Rhode Island taxpayers. Our team has reviewed this report. It became clear that the proposal put too much risk on Rhode Island taxpayers and not enough on other sources. Before Director Brian Daniels and Director Warmer take your questions, I want to highlight some of the concerns that the independent reviewer identified in their report. First, under the proposal, the state and taxpayers would lose a minimum of $10.5 million on their investment. Second, the state and taxpayers would bear 100% of the financial risk of any construction or operating cost overruns. And third, while the state is being asked to invest at a minimum of $60.9 million in taxpayer funds to make the project viable, the developer is investing $0 in the project, which I was never comfortable with. The financial review concluded that it is not in the best financial interest of the state or its taxpayers. Further complicating the development is the fact that the Armory property currently has two owners. The City of Providence owns the parking lot and the adjacent park, and the state owns the Armory building. Said simply, the current proposal of the Cranston Street Armory is not a good deal for statewide taxpayers, and ultimately the state needs to make decisions based on what's best for Rhode Island taxpayers statewide. Redeveloping is an important project for the Providence community. This project has the possibility of invigorating the neighborhood and bring much-needed economic stimulus to the West End community. And we stand to continue to work with Providence to make good things happen for their community. And the state, just like we are with other important projects, should help support this effort. After seeing all the information, we've come to the conclusion that this is a local community project, not a state project, which is why we've begun high-level conversations with Mayor Smiley and his team about the possibility of transferring the ownership of the building to the city. And I'm pleased the mayor and his team have shown initial interest. The goal is to come up with a mutually beneficial strategy to develop the Armory in a way that protects taxpayers statewide while enriching the local economy and West End community. These discussions are ongoing, and we're also open to exploring other options as well. With that, we'll take questions.
So we're going to get to everyone's questions, and we'll be passionate, and I'll take it first.
So Governor, you've been on record saying that this was not a good deal for taxpayers before when you were reporting. At what point did you decide that it was a bad deal for taxpayers? And did you decide that before? Seemingly you decided that before the report came out.
So there were many things about the proposal that I instinctively felt as though needed to have verified, and that's the reason that we employed and got the report done to show, to actually seek out whether or not, in fact, what I was seeing was accurate. The position that is very clear to me is that this is a community project. This is not a statewide project. And the risks that the state taxpayers would incur, which is significantly tens of millions of dollars, and risks of any overruns on the cost of the project, as well as cost in terms of the overall operations, the risk is just too high for the state. But the city, you know, as a community project and a former mayor, this really potentially fits right in with what would make sense for them.
Couple of questions on what you said. Number one, I assume if the city was going to take ownership, they would need state money to be able to develop it. So isn't that the same thing? What is gained by simply saying, okay, you own it now, we don't, but here's our money to do it?
Well, first of all, that's part of the conversations that we're having with the city of Providence in terms of, you know, what the state involvement would be in a transfer of the property. Very important point is that you have two owners of this property. You have the state that owns the building, and you have the city that owns the parking lot and the park. My experience in real estate development is that you should have one owner. So that's what we're working with the city right now to determine whether that's a possibility in their minds, and also what it would entail from the state potentially to, you know, to have some level of involvement. But the distinction is the risk, right? The risk is infinite relative to the way that construction costs could go. State taxpayers would bear the brunt of that, and also operations. So for the state taxpayers, moving it to the city will actually, you know, will cap that risk at whatever level we potentially negotiate with the city if in fact that happens, and that's what we're in the process of doing right now.
Last one, and then Steve. And then we're going to go for Brian.
Yeah, no, I understand. But to ask the questions we were asking the directors earlier today, if I understand this correctly, there are really two options. One is Scout's contract says they shall be the master developer, and you renegotiate with them. Climate has changed, you want some different things, maybe offices aren't the big thing now, maybe it's housing. So that's one option. Instead, it sounds like we're going back to square one. You're going to, somebody's going to come up with a new RFP, whether it's the state or the city, then they bring in proposals, then they start vetting people, then they bring in JLL. So what this does is it seems to stop it dead in its tracks. So the question, after observing that, is if I got it right, that it stops it dead in its tracks and the whole thing starts from the beginning again. And if that's so, why not just renegotiate the terms with Scout?
I'm going to make this as clear as I can. It's a community project, not a state project. The state taxpayers should not take the risk that's involved the way it's currently presented. My opinion is that it's a citywide project, and we're going to do our best to empower the city with potentially a transfer of ownership to make that happen. So there's a big difference between what you said and what, you know, what your analysis is. No, this keeps the project going. We want to keep this project going. The state wants to make sure that something happens there that's positive. That'll be, you know, in the discussions with the mayor, and in fact, we're able to make some sort of agreement on a transfer of the property. This keeps it going. This doesn't stop it. What you're suggesting is that we continue to force a statewide project on this issue. It's not a statewide project, and the taxpayers should not bear the cost of a local project that is good for the local community and not necessarily good for all the taxpayers in the state of Rhode Island.
Two-part question.
Yep.
Earlier, one of your directors, forgive me, I can't remember which, referenced there was $80 million in funding for community centers. Is that state funds? So is the state going to kick in $80 million to do what?
Yeah, we'll let Brian handle that, but that's in our Learn 365 plan, that there's money that's been approved in the state budget to use federal money to create learning centers around the state of Rhode Island, but Brian might be able to give context to that.
So it's a good question, and I think it gets to the governor's point that Providence, because the Providence and the community need to determine what they want the project to look like. There may be components of the Scout proposal that are worth proceeding, but one thing that's changed in the last few years is there's a stronger focus on housing. There's a substantial, the new funding sources for housing, so that may be in the mix. When it comes to the community purpose, there's $81 million in federal, that is American Rescue Plan Act It is a capital projects fund, so Providence's allocation of that is about $16 million, and that's matching. So Providence, if they chose to and wanted to do out-of-school learning and job development and health screening, and do a multipurpose community center, that is a funding source that they could tap for that project.
Their part would be limited to $16 million, of what you say is $81 million.
Well, that's just based on.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's an option of we're going to follow the lead in the conversation with the mayor, and they're going to set up what they want to happen there. If there's ways that there's buckets of funds that we have that are already appropriated certain things, well, like Brian said, housing or education, and they chose to have that in their, in their domain in terms of what they want to do, that's fine. We're not going to insist that any of this is done. We're just using that as examples where we can provide support. Yes.
That I wanted to ask was, from your lips, did this have anything to do with the two former directors, now the one with Providence State, and their ill-fated visit to his scout in the spring?
No, absolutely not.
Well, Governor, I was going to say, was this based purely on the financials? You seemed skeptical from the start. This idea was not hatched under your administration. Then, as Steve mentioned, this project came to notoriety for other reasons. Were there other factors at play, or in your mind, was this purely financial?
It's purely what's in the best interest of the people in the state of Rhode Island in terms of how we invest taxpayer dollars. The risk is too high, Brian. So when you talk about the construction cost and not understanding exactly where it would be, but the state would bear the entire risk on the construction cost, whether right now it's talked about $55 million, it could be 50% more, it could be 100% more, we don't know. And then in terms of the operational cost of the proposal, again, that's totally on the state in ways that I don't believe that the state should take that risk, the taxpayer should take that risk. So the outline that I gave is the reasons that we're making the decision that we're making public today is the fact that we want to be partners in a way that we can help make something happen on that property. And we're in discussions with the city right now, and we're going to continue those discussions until we find whether that's an option or not. Yep.
The pre-development contract that you're now ending calls for it to have this scout to be the master developer, and if you move on from them, that you can't use anybody else. Do you believe by transferring the project to the city, you now don't have to meet that burden and can escape that part of the contract?
Yeah, I'll let Brian handle that, but we talked about that before we got out here. Look, we believe that we're not obligated long-term on any scenario that, as we're moving forward right now, so. Go ahead, Jonathan.
We've terminated the contract as of today, and it is done. It's subject to the laws and regulations of the state of Rhode Island and the terms and conditions. I'll be happy to provide the letter for that termination to maybe explain it a little bit more, but we don't really have any more comment other than that. No.
We have a copy of the letter that we called in. And then Kevin has a question. We'll get there.
Understood. It's the same question, and I'm just trying to get at this. There is a memorandum of agreement. It does say something that even if you don't go ahead or do go ahead and looking for another developer, it's them. They're the master developer. So how do you get out of that? And just hearing there are other laws in the state of Rhode Island doesn't reconcile that.
It's part of the contract, and the contract is terminated.
Yeah, and we're very comfortable with that position.
What is the position? What's the legal right?
There's a whole, in your email, that we have, there's like 7 subsets that give us all the legal reasoning. So we're happy to take a look and we have a copy for you. Kevin?
Kathy and Brian beat me to them.
Alexa?
Okay, sure. I mean, have you spoken to anyone from Scout about your decision, or even leading up to your decision about your concerns about how this is more of a city project instead of a statewide one?
We've reached out. Jonathan or Brian can fill in the details on that, but we have reached out to Scout in advance of this announcement.
Right, but no meeting on the books so far.
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, do you have the community around the Armory, they spent about 6 years developing this plan? Do you have any words for people there who put in a lot
Yeah, well, the point is that we're going to continue to try to make something happen there, and we're going to continue the conversation to make sure that we're doing everything we can to help that part of the city of Providence achieve a use for the property that makes sense to the city, and that's why it's a city project and not a state project.
Can I ask about the city project versus state project? What is that demarcation? Because we have the Superman building, we have the soccer stadium, we have all these state projects that are also basically community projects, right? I mean, so why do we differentiate here and say we don't want cost overruns on this project, but these other projects, which are also downtown neighborhood, Cranston, they are not? I don't understand it.
The risk is capped.
I'm sorry?
The risk is capped. We've made a commitment on those two projects to invest a certain amount of dollars, but remember that the overriding majority of the investment is being made through private funding.
Right, I heard earlier this morning in review that you might be exploring some housing development possibly in the Armory, but has the administration actually looked at what it would cost to have a project in the Armory that includes housing or is entirely housing? I can imagine it'd be a lot more expensive than what is proposed right now.
Well, we're open to all options, but right now we're committed to finalize conversations with the city of Providence before we move forward in any other direction.
How would you characterize your talks with the mayor about after the city assumed the ownership of the property? What's that been like and how far along are you?
Yeah, I'll let the mayor speak on that, but we've had conversations and they continue. They're positive. There's interest. Where we end up, time will tell, but there's interest. And the mayor, I'll say that the mayor sees this as an important project for the city, and if I was sitting in his seat, I feel the same way.
Thank you, Governor.
Yes.
Thank you. Those conversations been going on. How long have those conversations been going on with the mayor? How long have you been talking with the city?
Probably 3 weeks or so.
Thank you, everybody, for coming today.
Yeah.
Governor, so was your decision, you're already trying to move off the project before the JLL report came out then? Or did you know it was in?
Brian asked the question again.
So if you've been talking to the city for 2 weeks to transfer the property, the JLL financial report was released today. So was the decision, did you already make the decision beforehand that the state didn't move off this before you had the numbers from JLL? Or did you basically have the numbers?
Yeah, we've had those we've had drafts that we weren't making, as final reports for a few weeks anyways.
If the scout sues on this, do you expect the attorney general will be defending the state, or will that be private?
It's a question for him. Thanks, guys.
Yes.
Gotta go.
Yeah.
Thank you.